Hi, David Odell here with OdellCompleteConcrete. Today we're looking at this driveway. It's about a 30-year-old driveway and it's got some brick ribbons in it. The bricks were did initially first, and then they poured the concrete around them. And you can see that the concrete has been raised up by some tree roots that used to be in the planter right next to it. The trees have been removed, but now we've got a major trip hazard. So we had a few options. It was either tear out the concrete and pour it all back and then replace all the brick ribbons, which was an expensive proposition. So the alternative was to leave the concrete and adjust the brick to fit the new slope of the driveway. So that's what we did. We're going to remove the brick here and we're going to adjust the brick to match the concrete height. So since the concrete came up from the tree roots, it really weakened everything else around it. And the brick was chipped from the movement of the concrete. So there's a lot of damage from the tree roots. So we're going to take out the worst of this brick area. We're going to replace it with some new brick. And we're going to match the brick to the driveway height. Eliminate those trip hazards. As we removed the brick, we found there was a good footing underneath these ribbons, which is surprising. When the brick's done first and initially, there's usually not much of a footing. A lot of times it's just a mortar bed. But in this case, they actually had a concrete footing under these bricks, so we were in good shape. And that's why the bricks didn't come up and the driveway did. The actual footing under the bricks was thicker than the driveway, so the bricks stayed, the driveway came up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that same footing and we're just going to build up on top of those footings with some mortar mix and we'll reset the new brick. Instead of using full brick, I'll use split brick. That way I can get more concrete underneath it and I can get the height right where I want it to be. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get it really clean. We'll sweep these out, get rid of all that red dust, get all the loose debris off the existing footing, and then we'll put some concrete glue on top of that footing so we can bond the new bed to the old footing. Also, whenever you set the brick first and you pour up against the driveway, there's no grout joint on your brick. Between the driveway and the brick, there's no grout joint. So it's very difficult to get the new brick in now, since it was a very tight fit when they did it that way. So the brick that I'm getting happens to be a little bit shorter than the old brick, which allowed for me to get a new grout joint around both sides of the brick, or both ends. And since I'm doing that does create another problem with your grout, because your grout meets the driveway, and if the driveway is moving and the brick isn't, you create a point in that mortar bed where there's a bind, and then when the cars drive over the brick and hit the driveway, they shift, and that could pop your grout out on the ends of your brick where they meet the driveway. So what I'm going to do to eliminate that problem is we'll put a 1/2 inch radius on the actual grout line. That way we eliminate some of that stress from the binding of the concrete and the mortar joint. Gives it a little bit more freedom of movement without affecting the grout line, in other words. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to the grouting stage. Now this brick, you're probably thinking, well, this brick doesn't match the other brick, and that's true because the other brick's about 30-year-old. Initially, from the looks of the things of this deal, it was initially a white flash brick, which means it had a lot of white paint splattered on the brick. And what that does is just makes it antiqued and more of a used look. But most of it had washed off over time, and that's always what happens with white flash brick, especially on the ground. All the white comes off. So there's very little white left on the original brick. So what I'm going to do is just use a common red brick. And when I do my rinse from my grout, I'll leave just a little bit of residue of the cement on the bricks here and there just to give it that old look. And that way it'll blend a little bit better. Now that's how I'm going to make this brick look old, is leave mortar on it basically. You can see I'm getting a nice gap in between the driveway and the ends of the brick here. And that way I can put my mortar in there. And then I'll edge the mortar joint as well. Now whenever you're dealing with setting brick and concrete, what you want to do is soak them in a bucket of water and then set them. Otherwise they're going to flash dry and they probably won't bond to the concrete. So by soaking them first, they adhere to the concrete a lot better. There's no need in using a level when you have two fixed points that you have to match. All you need is a good straight edge and go with that. Point A to point B, and that's where the bricks have to go. So we've repaired most of the brick here that was damaged or had trip hazards. You can see the slope on the brick. In that one area where we had to bring it up about a good 3/4 of an inch. Now this is ready for grouting. And while I'm at it, I'll even touch up some of the other failed grout joints around all the rest of the brick. So I'm going to use a grout bag, squeeze it in there, and I'm going to push it down, make sure it's all the way to the bottom of the brick. Once I get it nice and flat, I'll come through there with an edger on both sides. Because whenever you put your grout up against a half-inch radius driveway or any kind of adjoining concrete that has a radius, the brick overlaps that joint and it goes from 0 to half-inch thick. Well, that area is going to chip off, so it's best just to edge it. Now when I do my initial sponging of the brick to clean them up, I'll just leave a nice little fogging of the cement residue over them, and that'll kind of give it that old worn look. So I added a little mortar along the existing brick where the brick actually settled away from the driveway, and then I re-edged it just to clean it up a little bit. And there's the edging I'm talking about, where you edge on the ends of the brick between the driveway and brick. That way you won't have a grout failure. Now since I'm leaving a little residue of the concrete on top of the brick, and because it's wet, it doesn't look that light right now, but as it dries it'll lighten up, which will kind of simulate what's going on with the older brick. Since we edged it, we created some excess mortar that'll just have to be brushed off. This particular job happens to be in Newport Beach, California. There it is. Everything's a little moist still right now, but you can kind of see the fog of the residue I left on there, and as that dry, it'll lighten up quite a bit. That's where that major transition was. You can see it's nice and smooth now. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. If you like these, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to get the latest and greatest updates as I roll them out. Thanks. Have a nice day.